How's it going? Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones. Today we are going to discuss The Outer Worlds 2, and today I'm going to be giving you my Outer Worlds 2 early review. I'm going to make this quite a relatively short one, just condense it into everything that you need to know from all of the press gameplay. So yesterday I went into greater detail around this game, the writing, and the history of Obsidian Entertainment. You know, I'm a massive New Vegas fan, and I think a lot of people are very much hankering for a deep RPG experience at this point, especially after Avowed. I also discussed, how they've made some amazing games in the past, like the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Neverwinter's Night, and so many other great games. Obsidian Entertainment are one of the few developers left that still make compelling narrative games with good gameplay, an interactive RPG in the more modern sense. But a lot of people are kind of now worried and concerned because Obsidian games have kind of lost their quality in some aspects, especially when looking at recent releases like Avowed. But I do think that The Outer Worlds 2 is their main project. They went all in for this game, and Avowed was almost like a practice, almost a warm-up, if you will, to what this game is doing, but on a much bigger scale. So make sure you subscribe if you're new to the channel, become a wise one today if you love deep analytical content around video games, early reviews, and philosophical content. You're in the right place. Become an intellectual gamer, and don't be a part of the herd sheep mentality. So become a wise one, subscribe.
Your Mac friend, Brent Rambo.
So please go watch my other video around The Outer Worlds 2 if you want my more biased opinions. Today I'm going to try and keep it as objective as possible. I think that's very important in a game review, but let it be known that I am concerned about some of the writing, some of the choices that your character has when it comes to dialogue, and the kind of wink-wink meme quality of modern-day writing today. But there's also a lot that I like about The Outer Worlds 2. So we're going to discuss all of that now with the positives and negatives.
Why are you running?
So the first thing is, now there's a full-on radio, okay? So it is trying to capture, a bit of that Fallout DNA. So basically, as you go about and you do quests and all that kind of stuff, they will actually comment on what you're doing, how you're kind of interacting and shaping the world. Also, faction gameplay is back. I don't think it's going to be as complicated as New Vegas. I doubt very much that there's, like a costume disguise system that we had in a very old game at this point. But there you go. But there is actual faction, gameplay happening here. And it will lock you out of certain options, I assume. And basically, it will make each playthrough very different because you do have to align yourself with a particular faction if you want to. And it's just one of those games that is going for a proper RPG experience, where the first game was very light and very stripped back experience and very small little hub areas that you could explore. This gives you so much choice, so much, variation when it comes to gameplay itself, when it comes to your character and shaping your character with the traits and also with the debuffs and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot going on here. Traits truly do matter this time around in The Outer Worlds 2. So basically, this will stop you from, being a perfect character at everything. You have to actually pick your battles. You have to actually choose who you want to be in this world. If you want to interact with something in the environment, you need that skill. Now, the good thing I really like about this new trait system is it actually limits you, but in a good way. So now there's actual things to interact with in the environment, and you can only do so if you do have the right trait or personality, quality to you. So if you're playing as, a mad scientist and you want to figure out an equation or some kind of weird, futuristic technology, you actually need to be leveled in that particular way. You actually need to understand that skill. So there's going to be, skill checks in dialogue as well, but also just environmentally, there's going to be skill checks. And that's very important. That's something that I've missed so much from the older Obsidian games. Also, there's some immersive, details that just wasn't in the previous game. So now if you wear a particular helmet or, certain outfits, you will actually see that reflected in your character. The vision will actually change and all that kind of stuff. outfits actually matter a lot more this time, and so do things like weapons. They have better recoil, better animations, you can slide, you can double jump. It just feels so much better to play, so that is a huge positive with the gameplay aspect. You can spec into things like sharpshooter, pickpocket, or scrapper. There's so many different playstyles now, and this all actually levels up with you, depending on what you're doing in the world, and then you will actually have a floor that comes with that the more you level up. So it's a nice, yin and yang kind of balance system. So now there's so many different floors that your character can have, and this really does make the gameplay much more dynamic. Some of it is even kind of overboard at times from what I've seen, but it is really nice that they have that reaction system, and it really does make it feel like a proper innovation on the RPG formula, in my opinion. So that is a huge positive. And speaking of immersive features, now there's actual third person in this game, so you can switch to that anytime you want. And also just the NPCs in general, they feel a little bit more alive, and they react to what you're actually doing a little bit more in the world. And that is a big deal in an RPG like this. Now, I don't think it's going to have the same, morality choices and deep thematic philosophical themes that Fallout has, but as many of you pointed out in my previous video, I need to get over Fallout. This is its own thing, and I do understand that, but at the same time, that is a very old game, and it still does so many things better than most modern day games.
Can you tell me your name?
My name is Jeff.
Now, do bear in mind, this Outer Worlds 2 review is based on all of the press access gameplay and everything that we have seen thus far that I'm allowed to talk about, okay? So I'm not talking about the full game experience as of yet. So now let's get into a few negatives. Now, the stealth gameplay doesn't seem to be amazing to me. It does seem like it's lacking in animation. It's pretty disappointing, to be honest. You're basically going up behind people and probing them. That's right, stick a couple of fingers up there. You might get a tasty treat, and they suddenly die. It's not, a nice animation takedown, and at this point, I just don't know what we're doing. Also, the gore in this still sucks. Like, why? Why can't we get the juicy giblets like we used to get? Like, what is wrong with modern day games? Like, are they afraid to, upset people with violence, even though this is supposed to be a mature game? Where is the gore? I want gore, please. I'm not insane. I do appreciate your comments and your feedback, but I am going to mention Fallout again. I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, like, the gore and the combat in that still today feels so much more visceral and realistic. This almost feels cartoony, like the way things get blown apart and stuff like that. Like, it just doesn't have the same, that same juice, Another positive this time around is facial animations are actually a lot better. Also, when you're interacting with certain characters in certain quest lines and stuff like that, the dynamic camera and the movement, they actually move their arms around. They actually look a little bit more like a real person, which is nice. It's not as stiff as Avowed or anything like that. And the writing, for the most part, let me get into that, because that is my main thing. It might not, like I say, be as deep as some previous Obsidian games that truly, make you reflect on philosophical themes of different groups and ideologies and where you fit into all of this. It's a little bit more of a fun, kind of tongue-in-cheek game, and I guess that's just the Outer Worlds. That's what they're doing. That's the themes of this game. Corporations are bad, consumer capitalism bad, and hyper-consumer, society obviously leads to this horrible work-life balance where it's just like you're a slave to the corporations, which sounds pretty much like today's world, to be honest.
Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
I'm a modern day writer, and I love to make quippy little jokes, but there are times where it just feels like you're like talking to the developers instead of talking to the characters, if you know what I mean.
This is clearly just the writers in the writing rooms. Wouldn't it be cool if the guy you least expect gets your fucking eye? Oh, but it's way more clever than you think it is.
But it does feel so much more fleshed out. Like, areas are so much bigger now, like exploring them, and you really do have to, pick a path, and there are different outcomes to each quest. So everything you do feels much more weighty and an actual RPG, not a fake RPG with fake choices. And I really do appreciate that. And also just way more customization this time around with your character. So, flaws, traits, abilities, perks, all of this stuff is crazy. You can truly play this game tons and tons of different ways, which I really like. And also you have these gadgets now, which kind of remind me of gizmos you would get in Ratchet and Clank or something, which basically is like almost your main ability. So instead of using like the VATS slowdown time ability, you can switch it out for something else, depending on your playstyle. I just think the Outer Worlds 2 gameplay is so much better because there's always different solutions to any problem that you come across, and that is what an RPG should be. It should allow for freedom. And if they're gonna keep building on this and then bring it over to an IP I care about more than the Outer Worlds universe, I'm very excited. So to round off this Outer Worlds 2 review, this early access look at the game from everything that we have, I do really think this is a big step up compared to the first game, but there are a few things that just still feel static to me. So this is a negative. Basically, when you're wandering around, you know, these big open lush lands with a lot of foliage and stuff like that, like nothing feels alive. You know, the wildlife and stuff like that, it all feels a little bit scripted. To me, immersion details truly matter in a game. Now, this is a biased take, okay, so let me just say that. But I love games like Dragon's Dogma 2 where the wind interacts with the foliage, where a monster, you know, when they collapse, they make contact with the object, or you make contact with the enemy. Everything has proper physics, and, you know, it feels much more alive when that happens. This feels very like last gen in that situation when it comes to that technology. Like nothing really interacts with you, and that's kind of disappointing. So I know a lot of people don't care about game physics. For me, it does matter a lot. Maybe I'm just an autistic creep, I don't know, but I just thought I should say that. The themes of the factions this time around are way more interesting compared to the first game, or something like in Starfield. They actually have some ideology underneath it all, some interesting, you know, kind of religious factions as well. And I really do like that you have to basically get to know each faction and then choose, you know, who you're going to work with and stuff like that. That really does bring me back to, you know, games like New Vegas in some ways. Now, my final point I want to make with this Outer Worlds 2 early review is simply that combat itself is fun. It's so much more fun. It almost feels as snappy as like Borderlands in some ways, or something like Destiny. The shooting just feels so much more refined, and it just actually feels good to engage with combat now, even if it doesn't have the gore and, you know, that immersion level of physics that I want. It still is much better compared to the first game, so that is a huge win. So there you go, that is my Outer Worlds 2 review based on all the early press gameplay. I just thought I should get this out there because a lot of people are, you know, maybe wondering if they're gonna again subscribe to Game Pass, which is an absolute price hike joke now, just to play this, or if they're gonna, you know, shill out the money to play this and pay full price for it. So hopefully those positives and negatives will help you make a decision before, you know, you kind of get brainwashed by the marketing and stuff like that. So there you go, my white swans. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.